Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations That Matter. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I'm Yorona Boster, certified speaker and communications coach, life coach, speaker, author, and podcaster. I live, breathe, and function at the intersection of communication and healthy, balanced leadership, helping people communicate with purpose and integrity with both themselves and all of the people around them. Before our guest introduces herself, I have a request for anyone listening or watching. As this series continues, I would really love your input on communication topics that really intrigue you. Because communication runs deep, in fact, as Victoria and I both know very well, a lot deeper than we'd like to think, I want you to not be afraid to stretch the limits of where and how it shows up in your life and bring that to me. DM your ideas to me, drop them in the comments, or even email them to me at yorona@yoronaboster.com. All right, I'm going to have our wonderful guest here, Victoria, introduce herself, tell our audience a little bit about yourself before we jump into our conversation.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Yorona. First of all, really delighted to be joining you here today. My name is Victoria Rennoldson. I'm also really passionate about communication. The space that I'm in really intersects between global leadership, communication, and cultural intelligence, which I know we're going to talk about in more depth here today. But the work that I do is really around coaching individuals who are looking to elevate their global careers, helping teams to really think about how they connect and come together through the power of communication. And I'm also an author and a podcaster too. So hosting my own podcast. I had you on the show you're coming up on the show very recently. We recorded very recently. And also an author. So author of the book, Become a Global Leader, which came out at the end of last year.
Whew, wonderful, wonderful. And for anybody who is interested in looking for your book, where can they find that?
Sure. So obviously on Amazon and all the channels, but if you want to kind of find out more about the book, please do come along across to my website, which is culturecuppa, CUPPA.com/book.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'll have you at the end just say that once again so that people can really zone in on it and jump on board with what you're doing. Okay, so our conversation is going to be centered around that. I really was thinking about this from that AI-driven world that we're currently facing. And you, Victoria, you talk about that, the importance of our human capabilities in an AI-driven world. And you have 4 particular pillars, which are confidence, clarity, navigating challenging conversations, and cultural intelligence. So with those 4 pillars, which of them do you see as most essential? And I know, 4 pillars are 4 pillars, so they're equal in your mind, but what's the stepping stone? Which one is the starting point that is essential to help leaders stay deeply human and deeply effective in how they communicate, especially across those global teams?
So I think this is a great question for us to be starting on because, ultimately we are all impacted by AI today. Whatever our role is, whatever sector we're in, whether we are growing careers or growing businesses, we are all impacted by this. And rightly so, right? Like the AI is good. It's a force for good. It's creating new opportunities and creativity for us. So the first thing to say is I'm not trying to create any opposition of AI is bad and therefore, we need to do something different. But what I have seen, and I find really interesting in the conversations that I have with leaders, is that clearly there is a huge amount of emphasis right now on AI, on the tech and AI skills that people need to succeed. The emerging leaders, the future leaders, the current leaders.
Right.
And that is correct. Of course, we all need to up-level and upskill in AI, in the tech, to really understand how does this enable us. But I use that word enable very deliberately, which is for me, it's not a replacement to us. And as I wrote this book, Become a Global Leader, what became really apparent to me is that actually we need to have more conversations around the people skills. Historically, sometimes it's called soft skills. And this is a
Mm.
massive misnomer, massive kind of wrong naming of the skills, right? Because
Right.
they're anything but soft. Like, let's be really clear. Again, whatever industry you're in, whatever level you're at, these skills are absolutely vital to your success. And even more so in this AI world, because AI is going to be kind of taking away and helping you to be more efficient in areas that were not added value potentially for your role. So you
Right.
have to double down on your human skills, in your ability to connect. And so, your question, I love the question that
Mm.
you are asking me, which is which one's most important? And this is the real kind of tricky one, because of course, every time, the 4 pillars have come from the work that I've done over the last 11 years with individuals, with teams, with organizations. And every time I meet somebody new, it's actually, they have their unique blend. Almost like, like painting, like when you're mixing paints and mixing colors, like
Right.
everybody has their shade, like everybody has their
Mm.
right mix of those 4 pillars to create their unique Pantone color, if you like. And so that's the thing that I really, really, truly believe. But if you're going to push me and I was going to really answer that question, I think for me, I think ultimately the cultural intelligence, which sits within the connection pillar for me, which is really very much about how do we understand each other? How do
Mhm.
we connect to each other? How do we build great teams, even when we're really
Mm.
disparate and built over different locations?
Right.
That's the one that I would choose.
Okay, and that makes sense because you're talking about global leadership, right? And when we think
Yeah.
about global, there's so much cultural diversity. There's so much just automatically, you and I are speaking and clearly we have different accents. So it shows we come from different regions, which interestingly means that we have different colloquialisms, different catch-alls, different phrases that mean different things. So we have to have better understanding of that nuance. I want to go back to what you said though before, because you said it's not a soft skill, right? These
Mm,
things we call soft skills. I was thinking about it from a human capability standpoint.
mm,
Human capability is not a soft skill. It's a leadership infrastructure. At least
mm,
that's the way I see it in my mind. And leadership comes from basically anybody who has any course of responsibility, experience, and wisdom over anybody else. So when I think about leadership, I even expand out into parenting, right? Parents
mm,
they have authority, not necessarily authoritarian, but they have authority because they are put in a position of responsibility. So
mm,
leadership requires understanding you're placed in a position of responsibility for the people who are subject to your responsibility to what your needs are or what their needs are. And I think it's really important to understand that that impact means that we have to get better at crafting those skills that allow us to stay connected, that
mm,
allow us to have, like you said, those challenging conversations.
mm,
I don't know about you, but in this day and age, one of the things I have seen is people adverse to having challenging conversations.
mm,
Just period. Very adverse to it. It's either, especially from a leadership position, it's either just go with what I'm telling you.
mm,
This is what I'm telling you. This is what I know to be true. You have to do that. Or the people who sees a hole and want to have that conversation about, but I see this problem coming up, and they're so afraid that they'd rather not even navigate it at all. They'd rather just
mm,
avoid it altogether. So I would love to go into that a little bit deeper,
mm.
because the soft skill of being able to navigate a challenging conversation is something I think everybody in any workforce needs to know how to do if they want to be successful at the work that they do.
Yeah. I mean, completely with you. And I think, this is not just you kind of broaden out that idea of leadership to other aspects of our lives. Where else are we showing up as leaders? And I think, before we jump into the challenging conversation, that idea of the cultural element of this is, we have a view of what it means to be a leader. We don't actually see it. We wear cultural lenses all the time. And so we don't understand necessarily how we show up in our impact, what the cultural dynamics are that influence our behaviors, that influence the way that we communicate, interact with others. And so we might have a very specific view of what does leadership mean? What does it mean to be a good leader? What we think are the right ways of doing it, I'm going to put it in inverted commas, professional way of being a leader. And then if you're working with diverse teams, and by the way, that doesn't have to be across globally, like across countries, because some people listening to this, of course, will be working with people in many different regions. But for other people, they might be working with people in just one location. But of course, the nature of the world today means that you are probably in a diverse team in some way or form. And diversity is more than your nationality. It could be about religion. It could be about political views. It could be about diversity of departments. It could be about generational, right? That's really critical in this day and age. So recognizing that the way you interact as a leader, you have your views of what is good, but your team might have very different views of what they expect of you as a leader. Now, if we apply that to the lens of challenging conversations, this is where it gets really, really interesting, because again, what is an expectation of how do you engage in a challenging conversation? There's a real cultural nuance to that.
That's a really good point. And it makes me curious about what it then means to walk into a conversation that you can perceive as potentially being challenging. I think about it like, okay, if I'm going to walk into a conversation that I know is going to be challenging because I know this person holds this view, this person holds this view, this person has this perspective, and sometimes their perspectives are coming from their position, their own responsibilities in the work, their experience with their own responsibilities in the work, and then on top of that, their cultural nuance differences. So as a leader, what I would want to do is walk into that with openness and curiosity.
Yes.
I would want to lead with that. I would want to get curious about what it is they're seeing to give me a full 360 picture of the whole process, rather than saying, this is my scope, this is what I know to be true, and I have to stand firm on what I know to be true because I'm a leader. And to be a leader means you have to tell people how it's going to be. When the reality is that an effective leader is more likely to sit back and listen to their team.
Yeah.
And be open to what their team has to say, has to contribute to the conversation, and then take all of that and integrate it into what they know to be able to come up with a proper solution or idea or forward thought process or next step goals and so on. But I think I just, something came into my brain as I was thinking about this, and we do have some questions coming up in the comments that I'll get to, is the AI side of things. And I wonder if, and I know that you see AI as a wonderful opportunity and a tool and things like that, but I do wonder sometimes if the reason why people are hesitant to have the conversations, to have the challenging conversations, is because they think that, well, the technology we have could do that for us.
Oh, interesting.
And we'll just implement it, right? So like, why do I need to be skilled in having those? Why not just let my AI do it for me, give me the solution, and then I'll implement that? And here's what I would say. I would say, because if we do that, we're actually creating a dependency on the AI, which can weaken our ability to do it for ourselves if the AI is not actually there, right? If we look at AI as a tool is meant to augment what we're doing. It is not meant to replace what we're doing, because what it does is then it eliminates our ability to do that for ourselves when that tool isn't around or accessible.
I would also argue, I think, I'm a really great believer in using AI for certain types of tasks. And I do know people who use it in that space of what do you think I should do in this situation? How should I respond? Or how could I kind of come up with the clever kind of answer to this? But the reality is the AI is only as good as the prompts that you put in. And of course, some people are really good at that, prompting, telling them exactly what I need. but the AI cannot see the person in front of you. So you are planning to have a challenging conversation. Part of that is context, emotions that have been in there before, the previous disagreements that you've had or interactions which haven't gone so well. The AI cannot read in the moment what's going on with that person's nonverbal communication. How is their body language detached or different from the words that they're saying? And coming back to culture and cultural intelligence, a part of this is also understanding some people are indirect communicators. They're not actually not going to say, I don't agree, or I don't, you're wrong. They're going to say that in a very roundabout way. Equally, expressiveness is a really key behavioral preference in cultural dynamics. So, some people are really loud in the way they disagree with you, like, they're disagreeing with you. But if you're on the other side, maybe you've been brought up culturally to be very quiet about that, not challenge or confront. Maybe also there's a power dynamic in that you don't challenge people who are more senior to you or perceived to be in a position of power compared to you. You may not be very expressive. Actually, the other person, if you're very indirect and also not very expressive, may not even realize that you are challenging them, that you are saying, no, I don't agree with you. And you can therefore then see how this miscommunication comes up. So, flipping it back to the AI can give some ideas, but we also have to be very human about this, that we're a human reacting to another human. And if we're just relying on prompts, we can have a massive misstep there, because not layering in the things we do as emotionally intelligent humans, as culturally intelligent humans as well.
I want to make this super simple so people really get this. What I believe you're trying to say, Victoria, is that when you are prompting your AI, it's yours, meaning it's the relationship you have between you and your AI, and that AI doesn't have the relationship you have between you and this subordinate, you and this leader, you and this other person. It doesn't have that, doesn't have the key of their perspective, their totality, who they are. It only is taking your perspective, your all of your wants, your needs, your desires, your things of that nature, unless you give it the other people's pieces of the puzzle. It's
There
kind
is
of like
that.
it's taking one piece of the puzzle and
Yeah.
making an assumption about what the puzzle looks like without actually operating on knowledge of the other pieces of the puzzle.
I love that idea. Yeah, you're only seeing part of the puzzle. And I think part of that, which is really critical, is that it's not reading the emotions. It's not reading the room. It's not really understanding what's going on beyond, as you say, your perspective on this. So, yeah.
Okay, I want to go to the comments, because
Sure.
Savio put in a really good question. He said, "What are the fears we as humans need to confront when it comes to AI adoption?"
Yeah, brilliant question. Thank you so much for asking that question. So, look, I do a lot of thinking, a lot of like reading in this area, like looking at what people are saying. And clearly, look, there are lots and lots of fears. And you can just look at the media headlines to kind of pull them out. Like, we're going to all lose our jobs. We're going to be replaced by the robots. We're not going to have any value in the new world. There is nothing for us to do. And I think that can feel really quite scary, right? But the interesting thing is, you see what you look for. On the flip side, there is so much. I've already done a lot of research on this. There are statistics and research that talk about the upsides of AI, the job creation. Yes, jobs will go, but new jobs will come. And actually the net impact of that is more positive. There'll be more opportunity for everybody. It enables us to go faster, be more creative, like spend time on things where actually it's more interesting. We can use our brain, we can use our creativity to come up with new ideas instead of doing the dull work that we really don't want to do. I'm excited by that.
And I'm going to push back just a touch here. We need to have guardrails in place, because while what you're saying is we want to give AI the dull work we don't want to do, what categorizes something as dull work is going to need to be a societal decision-making process. Because not everybody, some people are going to say, well, I don't want to have that hard conversation with so-and-so. Let me just let my AI do it.
Mm.
That's
So
not dull
true.
work, right?
Yeah.
No, because what that does is it disconnects you from another
Mm.
human being. One of the things we do not want AI to do is replace our attachments and connections we have to one another. Because, and this is from my background, as a communal species, we
Mm.
need one another to keep going. We
Yeah.
need to maintain our communal species. Otherwise, we become an entirely different species. And unfortunately, that's an event horizon situation that we don't see, we don't know, right? We
Yeah.
don't know what kind of species we would become if if we break apart, if we fracture the communal side of things.
And I think that's really, really important. So for me, it's actually also very important to recognize, and this is what I talk about in the book, which is, we need to make sure that we are not disengaging and disconnecting. And in fact, in the workplace, if we kind of bring it back to thinking about leaders and thinking about teams,
Right.
the reality is we have to make quite a big effort to connect. It sounds really bizarre, but actually often people are, obviously it does depend where you are around the world, but you may be working partially from home. You may be remote completely. Some people are these days. You may be on Teams meetings or lots of meetings back to back. But I think there's a lot of interaction, whether it's meetings or collaboration tools, whether you're using messaging tools and all the different collaboration platforms out there, which are amazing. They're really great stuff. But that does not replace our connection and conversation. And the
Right.
funniest thing is that, and what I really talk about in the book is, how do you have a good conversation? Well, that's actually a chapter, because people are actually not really sure how to do this anymore.
I know. I actually have this incredible book. It's sitting right here because I do a lot of research through it. It's
Mm,
called Talk: the Science of Conversation and the Art of Being Ourselves. And it's by Alison Wood Brooks. She's actually a
mm,
professor at Harvard. And it is such an incredible book because it really does break down what is the art of communication, what is having a conversation all about. And again, conversation creates connection. Communication creates connection. So when I hate to put it to conversation, because conversation implies verbal, right?
mm.
But we have all these nonverbal cues as well. So I
Huge.
like to really center it under the umbrella of communication, because communication is both the verbal and the nonverbal processes to
Mm,
connecting with one another. But again, as a species, that is our first core need. So in my book that I just wrote, my parenting book, which is
mm,
going to be dropping soon, I talk about there's a psychological theory. It's called the self-determination theory, and it was coined by two psychologists, Richard Ryan and Ryan and Dici, and they say that every human needs three things to really function optimally: connection, control, and competency. And control is really about autonomy. So really it's agency or autonomy. Um, but I put it under the measure of control, because when you think about autonomy from a control position, we're talking about what can I control for myself,
mm,
not for others, but just for me. So when we have these things, when we have these needs met, connection, again, it's core to ourselves as a species. We get to determine and define what connection means to us. But where I see us going wrong with connection is that we're because of technology, we've usurped what real connection looks like with technology, with technological connection. And it's never the same measure. When you're in front of another human being and you're actually having a conversation or even just sitting with another, you're in a state of connection. Even if
mm,
you're just driving in the car with friends or family, you're in a state of connection because there's an energy exchange, there's a lot of nonverbal cues being processed. It's a beautiful, beautiful experience. It's also extremely messy. And people don't like mess. So as our technology advanced, we said, oh, okay, well, instead of calling somebody and having a phone call where there's an awkward pause and there's a this, I'll just text with them. And
mhm,
then it won't be so awkward. The problem is, one of the reasons why we're now starting to see a loneliness epidemic is because we fractured what real connection looks like.
Mm.
So when I think about it, yeah, so you see what I'm saying? No, I
Yeah.
see you have something to say, so I want you to add. What do you have to add?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really, for me, that is absolutely, I see that too. And I think it feels like easier sometimes to do that quick exchange of a quick WhatsApp, a quick text, a quick, like, it's it backwards and forwards. But actually, you're right. It's so interesting, isn't it? We talk about connecting in the world of, well, whatever world we're in, like we're connecting to the call, we're connecting for a conversation virtually, we're connecting for this. But actually, that's a really interesting thing. Like, how do you make space and time for real connection? And I think the thing that I really talk about in my book is you have to be quite intentional for that. In fact, it feels like really tricky and difficult in the work context to make that space when it feels like you're under pressure to make meetings shorter, to get straight to it. So it's sometimes really about, actually, you have to create different spaces, whether those are one to one for informal conversations, which, sometimes just have to happen virtually. There is actually no means to get together face to face. But
Right.
then that's where the visual is really important, like being on camera, seeing each other,
Yeah.
revealing. And I talk about, being able to share more about your own context and like what's going on in your life, and being able to share that with people who are in your team.
Right.
And, it's also really also about the collective getting to know each other, making time for that. Now, that for some people is possible in one location. For others, that might only happen very rarely, like once or twice a year. But then you've got to create those virtual spaces, which are really protected spaces for
Yeah.
social connection, for conversations where you do get to know each other. And there is that time dedicated to it, because otherwise it's really difficult to keep performing. It's difficult to achieve really stretching goals if you're not having that connection in that way.
Agreed. Agreed 100%. And before I go into, I have two more comments that are coming in that I definitely want to
Sure.
address. But one of the things I want to give people is a little bit of a tangible takeaway. So I was working with somebody who is very high up in a very well-known organization. So names shall not be named, because
Yeah.
no, some people I work with actually, it's interesting. Some people I work with don't actually want anybody to know that they've worked with me to become a better communicator. They
Mm.
just want to be perceived as a better communicator in their work. And it is that's a whole other psychological tidbit that we could get into. But for now, one of the things that I said to him, he tends to go into a lot of his meetings with his Slack channel up and this and that. So he'll be on a Zoom meeting with a lot of people all over the place, but he'll be answering messages here, answering emails here, da, 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 da. And I said to him, you may think that you're capable of doing all of those things at the same time, and you may be able to actively answer a question here on Slack, answer an email here. But the people that are in the meeting with you, sometimes it's a subconscious level, can sense your disconnect from them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So as a leader, I'm going to offer something to leaders. One of the most important things you can do is when you're having a meeting with other people, shut all those other things down. Focus in and concentrate. And what's incredibly powerful about that is when you do, you will pick up little nuances, hesitancies, little moments where somebody is about to say something, they switch it to something else, and you're like, huh, I caught that. They wanted to say something else. And you can bring that in. You could say, I noticed that there was maybe something else going on in your mind. Would you like to share
Mm.
that? It creates such an incredible space, because what happens is people are like, oh, my leader is paying attention. They're seeing me. They're seeing the cues I'm putting out there that you may not be able to pick up when you're multi-focused. And I hate to say multi-focused or multitasked. I'm going to say
Yeah.
multitasked, but the reality is, as human beings, we are incapable of multi-focusing.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think,
Yeah.
people notice. I mean, I remember working with a team who had a similar challenge. Somebody in the team, in the leadership team, they just knew. And part of that is, we know when somebody's eyes are wandering, like when they're going all over the screen, and then they ask a question. And this was happening in this team. This person kept asking questions when that topic had already been talked about. And it was very clear they weren't able to pay full
Pay attention.
attention. And
Right.
that's frustrating. That creates tension. That creates challenging conversations, because at some point
Yes.
somebody's going to has to say, give feedback, even at a very senior leadership level among peers. hey, that is not okay. Like, this is not respectful to my time, respectful to the team collective. It's not respectful to our agenda and what we have to achieve here. So I think the multitasking thing, that's a really powerful point, because I agree. I think it's,
Right.
we may convince ourselves we're good at it, but reality is others see it in you and they know what's going on.
They do. And it's interesting because we can span that out in all aspects of our lives. In all aspects of our lives, how often are we distracted by a device while having a conversation with our partner or our spouse or our children or a loved one or a friend? Stop that. This is what I'm just going to tell
Mm.
everybody, and then I definitely want to get to these. We have to stop that.
Yeah.
We cannot, when we're focused on people, they can feel it. And
Yes.
that focus drives a much more beautiful, deeper connection. And it's
Mm.
all about our presence. Our presence sends a message to the other
Mm.
people that are around us. And that message is, you matter to me.
I'm really glad you said that, because one of the key questions I always ask people to think about, whatever they're communicating, whether they're speaking on a stage to hundreds or thousands of people, they're being interviewed by the media, they're presenting, they're meeting their team, whatever the context, it's kind of like, what do you want people to know? And actually, people are pretty good at that. They know what they want to say, they want to broadcast
Mhm.
to others. But then it's like, what do you want people to feel? Like, actually, how do you want them to experience you? Like, what is the energy, the feeling you're bringing into that interaction? How is it
Right.
you want people to sense you when they've finished talking, you finish talking, or we've finished that conversation? And I think that's a brilliant question to be asking. So I'm really glad you were talking about this as well.
Yes. Oh, so wonderful. Yes, I call it, what do you want people to receive from you?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
it changes the focus from us as, what do I want people to know, versus what do they need to receive?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
changes your focus to them. Oh, what is it that they need from me?
Yes. Yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
okay. So I want to get to this because this is a really interesting comment. Somebody said also, as human beings, we need to be able to hold someone accountable, especially if things go wrong. We can't hold AI accountable for anything, and the tech companies cite AI could be wrong to mitigate risk.
Mm.
That's a really important comment, and I agree wholeheartedly. So it's
Yeah.
interesting, though, that the person says we need to be able to hold someone accountable. I think I've been talking about this recently. Shared accountability. Okay, I'm going to give you a really
Mm.
simple thing. And this is totally a psychological thing. There was a whole study done on this, but we've had really strong snowstorms recently. It's been
Mm.
terrible here. As the snow has been melting, the trees have been weakening. We recently, my husband and I, we were in the car, well, with our son, and we noticed that two of our trees in our community had come down. And we were like, "Oh no, what's happening there? Oh, that's not good." And we saw they're a lot closer to these other houses than to our houses. So my husband said, "Do you think we should send a message to the HOA?" And I said, "Maybe. I think it might be a good idea." And he said, "Well, probably somebody in one of those houses that's closer to it did it." There's a psychology in humanity where when people see something, they assume everybody else sees that thing, and then they assume that somebody else is taking responsibility for that thing, and then guess what happens? Nobody
Mm.
takes responsibility for it, because there's a lot of assumptions about where accountability and where responsibility lays, and then
Mm.
nobody does it. So I
Mm.
always say, be the first person to step up and be accountable, and everybody else will follow your guidance, and you'll
Mm.
feel like you're staying true to you and being integral to who you are.
Mm.
I Integrity is one of my highest values, and I really find, so I said to my husband, "Well, you know what? Just be on the safe side. Let me email them." I did, and in fact, I got an email back today that said, "Thank you, we're gonna get on this." They had no
Fantastic.
idea, and it had been there for over a week, and we said, apparently
Yeah.
nobody did. So when we think about holding someone accountable, I
Mm.
wanna span out and say, maybe it's not someone, maybe it's many someones. Maybe we
Mm.
need to actually be able to look at this is a humanitarian thing. What we're coming to with AI requires many someones to hold strong and hold
Mm.
accountability to the process that we're experiencing. What do
Yeah.
you think about that?
I think it's a really interesting expression, to say, we need to hold somebody accountable. that suggests that again, I don't know the context from this person, and I understand there might be context to what that's driving that comment, but it suggests to me there is some sense of actually we need to have somebody ultimately who can say either it was your fault or actually you need to do this. And I think this is what you're saying. This, I love that story. And for
Yeah.
me, it's also about that. How do we take personal responsibility? Now, I'm not saying we have to take personal responsibility for everything. That's not obviously what this is about. But it's kind of, what do you take responsibility for? And in the realm of AI, I think what is very interesting is that it is very, I'm going to use a word like flip-flop. So you can say, it can sound very confident, very sure about the facts. And you go, are you sure? Like, where did that information come from? And it will go, oh, sorry. Oh, did I give you the wrong information? And it will come up with a whole load of other stuff, which could be the opposite of what you just said. Or you could say, well, can you show me the sources of this information? Now, yes, sometimes that happens, but I know myself, then you have to go back and fact check. And sometimes you're like, what are these sources? These are not credible sources. These are not sources that I would rely on. So I think this is the really interesting point about responsibility in AI. We
Mhm.
cannot put responsibility on AI. We are the person prompting, asking the questions. And ultimately, if it's a human question, it comes back to, what can I take responsibility for? And then back to your kind of comment, the human collective, like, what's the best way for us collectively to take responsibility as well?
Yes, and I think this person was pointing that out. We can't hold AI accountable because it's, for anything really. And so do we hold the tech companies accountable, right? But then they say, right, AI could be wrong to mitigate that risk. And they're right. And what you just said, it validates that point. It's really the person utilizing the tool that has a measure of accountability to the use of it. I think about this from a really simplistic place. Let's say you have a hammer. Well, that's a tool. It's an inanimate object and it's a tool, but somebody could use it to harm someone.
Mm.
Someone else could use it to hammer in, and they're working on hammering something into the wall and accidentally break it, not on purpose, right? So there's intention, there's what the point, where you're pointing it to, what you're doing with it, how you're doing the thing with it. There's so much to the thing itself. So tech companies have come up with we got to mitigate our risk, right? So AI could be wrong. We'll just have that at the bottom of everything. AI could be wrong, but that doesn't actually give people the nuance to really understand, what does that mean for me as the
Hmm.
user of it?
Mm.
And I think that's where a lot of our conversations need to go. We need to create some guardrails of how people can utilize it to the best of their ability,
Mm.
without going to, without creating a chaotic environment that just allows for everybody to have their opinion and no facts to be drawn out, no
Yeah.
reality, no research-based knowledge and things of that nature. Because once upon a time, I don't know how you feel about this, but once upon a time, I do remember a time when I had to go to the library, go over
Yes.
to the card catalog, pull it out, find the book, go over to the book, read the entire book, then make all the connections in my own brain.
Yes, quite. Well, you remember encyclopedias, right? Like like my kids don't even know what an encyclopedia is. Like that was something where you got the information. You had to have a dictionary and a huge range of encyclopedias from A to Z. I think that is the fascinating thing, isn't it? And I think, what I find really interesting in this conversation is, back to, how do people say things? Clearly AI, well, currently in most of the tools isn't using nonverbal communication with us. I'm sure that will come, but it's using a very confident tone of voice, and a tone of voice where there is no self-doubt or self concern that it would give you the wrong information. It sounds really confident. And as us as humans receiving that, I think it's very compelling to listen to that and go, okay, that sounds right. That sounds like it's the right answer. And not to challenge it and not to question it, because the AI doesn't have the same level of, I wonder if that's right. Or am I saying this correctly? And in my tone of voice now, I'm not so sure about myself. And you pick that up and then you ask me a question. Do you see what I mean? So that's also some of the challenge around here. And I like, this idea of, how do we put the guardrails around that? Because we can easily forget we are still not talking to a human. We're still not kind of like talking to somebody else, like on a box or who's on the other side, responding. It's still
Mhm.
something that is being programmed to sound confident, to sound sure, to
Yeah.
sound there's no self-doubt in this.
Yes, that does bring me to the next one because question for both of us from Savio said, some say AI is a mirror. If there is any truth to that, what do we as humans need to do to make sure what is reflected is to our benefit and not to our detriment? And that's the problem, isn't it? Right? Because when we're
Mm,
looking in a mirror, we're not necessarily knowing what it is we need to identify might be this, that, and the other. I think I think that's where the guardrails come in. I think we have to have more I almost think we have to have more of a guidance system to help us utilize the AI. Instead
mm,
of allowing people to just randomly like they've thrown us a whole slew of tools and they just say, "Here, go at it." But we're not responsible if you do something with this, right? We
mm.
could go for it, right? Somebody walked into a hardware store and basically just said, "Have at it, whatever you want to do here. Whatever you want to take, whatever, however you want to use it, you use it. I'm not going to tell you how to use the chainsaw. I'm not going to tell you how to use the thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you any guidance for how to use this. I'm just going to give you all of it." And I kind of see it that way, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where, I mean, that question is really interesting to me because again, mirrors, it is mirroring something, but it's not mirroring our full reality. So one of the things, bringing this back to the conversation we've had earlier about culture,
Mm,
about, diversity, thinking about, people come from different places with different points of view. We know the AI is biased because it is based on the information primarily from Western sources. Primarily, actually, there are more men engaging than women. So there is a whole load of ingrained bias that is also in the information. So
yeah.
again, a big problem with this is that sometimes, we might be very convinced by argumentation, communication from the AI tools, but we're not really picking up that actually the foundations of that is it's not a neutral source. It's not coming at it from a very sort of neutral place. In fact, there is inherent bias in what it might be saying. Now, in the world that I'm in of cultural intelligence, there are lots of practitioners around the world, and many of them are trying to actually educate the AI, like feed in, like and make sure that it's becoming more culturally intelligent. And I know there are some people who've engaged with different AI tools and actually find it culturally intelligent. But I think, we've got to be very aware. We as human have our biases. We're not neutral, but equally AI isn't either. And that's interesting to think about.
Right. That is very interesting to think about because it means that actually I want to run this out because I was thinking about this from a developmental perspective.
Mm,
As humans, we're born into, with someone usually caring for us, right? The abandonment, that's a whole other area, but
mm,
usually we have one or two caretakers. There is never any bias from them either. Our caregivers are not biased either. So if we, let's say, a lot of times as a parent, there's a lot of parents who will, see their child drawing and encourage them and say, "Oh, that's such a beautiful drawing. That's so wonderful." And meanwhile, it's like stick figures and things like that, right? So we're doing that out of place of encouragement, not understanding that we might actually be doing more damage in a long range place if that's the only feedback they receive, because there's going to be a lot of bias towards what it is they're doing. They're going to naturally inherently say, "Well, my mom told me I can sing, so that's why I'm here at American Idol, because my mom told me, encouraged me so much," and meanwhile, the person can't. So I think that what it requires is a lot more of that neutrality, a lot more of encouragement with neutrality, with actual real feedback, with real critical feedback. And I lost my train of thought. That was I was going to a place with this, but I lost it for a second. Okay. Because recently we've seen a lot of people, excuse me, recently we've seen a lot of people who are developing relationships with AI,
mm,
actual relationships. And you said something before, "Oh, but AI is not real."
mm.
but to a number of them it is.
Mm.
There are tens of thousands of people who are actually having an AI boyfriend or an AI girlfriend. And what you said before, you're really having you're actually, it's you. You're having a
Mm.
relationship with yourself for all the things you want to see. And here's where the problem is. It puts you in a place of where the real world, where friction occurs in relationships, you don't have to have any of that friction. You don't have to have any of that discomfort that allows you to see another person's perspective that you might not necessarily agree with. But in that discomfort of perspective taking is so much growth. But when we don't have that, because we have a smooth, oh, I have a relationship with an AI and it's all smooth sailing, that my AI loves me. I'm saying this because this is some of the things that I've been hearing, some of the reports.
Mm-hmm.
There's no discomfort, and therefore there's no opportunity for growth and learning, for expansion of knowledge, for an expansion of perspective taking of other human beings around you. That what you see isn't truth, what you see is your perspective. And other people have their perspectives. And to get to the real truth, you need that input from others. But what we're currently dealing with is that there's a lot of people who actually don't want that. And we're pretty primed for that circumstance to keep going as a society, especially our Western cultures. We are very primed to have a lot more people more willing to divest of relationships with others because it discomfits them than to have a relationship with something that has friction.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I'm kind of reflecting because I suppose I'm really clear. I'm not an AI expert. I think that's the one thing to say. I think my expertise really sits in with human capabilities, understanding people who are in the workspace and how they develop their people skills to be successful. You know, people having relationships with AI, I think I'm probably not the right person to comment on that and how that's evolving. But what I do think, if I kind of think about what I do know, the context of people in as leaders in workspaces, what I think is true is that people can get quite reliant on the AI tools. But we all know when we receive something that has clearly been written by an AI tool. So I think, you know, my perspective on that is, you know, we can't just take what is produced in AI and then present it as our own thoughts and ideas. We do have to think about, actually, yes, please use it, but then think about what's your perspective on that. We need to retain the critical thinking, the judgment call of, is that really right? Or is that really true? Or is that how I would say this? Because I think back to one of the original questions about challenging conversations,
Right.
we might be triggering challenging conversations. We might be creating tension, I say unintentionally, but if we're just not paying enough attention to what we're taking out of a AI tool and then copying and pasting across without really thinking, you know, again, how is this landing? How is it I want the other person to feel? So that's what I really kind of, I suppose, translate it in my world, you know, how I kind of would answer that question. It's that idea of over-reliance and not being able to then put the critical thinking on, put the tone of voice on, and really say,
Mhm.
is this what I would really say to a real person or not?
Right. So essentially what you're kind of saying is we need to take a little step back. You know, we can utilize it as a tool, but then we need to take a step back and then assess it,
Mm,
evaluate it, and determine, is this actually me? Is this
mhm,
actually also in my best interest and the people that I'm responsible for, the people that I'm working with? Is it in everyone's best interest? And is this really where I want to go with it? All of the evaluation assessment tools, I think what we would do really well with is to create guidance and the capacity for assessment, right? If we have guidance and assessment guardrails, if you will, I think we could use it so much better, right? How am I guiding myself to doing this? And
Mm-hmm.
how am I assessing whether this is the right way I need to be going?
Mm-hmm.
First, how do I utilize it? Second, how do I assess whether I've utilized it correctly? And if I
Mm.
want to keep going in that direction or if I need to pivot and change direction. I think that probably more than anything else would be most helpful, instead of just having some kind of blanket statement that tells people, oh, AI could be wrong. But what
Yeah.
does that mean? And what kind of wrong? What are we talking about here? How do I assess whether it's wrong or whether it's right? How do I know? And
Mm.
I think this comes from, and you said this before about critical thinking.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I think we've usurped some of our ability for critical thinking on this, because we're like, I don't want to I don't have the energy to do it. Let me just copy and paste this in. Let me just,
Mm.
let me just do that. Is this, I don't care. It sounds good enough.
Yeah.
This is good enough.
Mm. And I think that's the danger, isn't it? Because I think that's when we can create more disconnection, more disengagement. And in fact, what we really want to do is make sure that people, again, are not just kind of not sounding like themselves anymore, sounding kind of detached, not
Right.
sounding like they care. And I think in kind of workspaces, that really genuinely matters. I mean, that we're talking about written messages here. I mean, the other thing that I think is really important, we haven't really touched on, is that the importance of voice. So even if you're not able to have a call with somebody, or whether it's virtual or a phone, even just like a phone call, can you imagine picking up the phone and calling somebody? But I think there's even something around the importance of things like voice messages rather than just texting or just
Yeah.
using WhatsApp. So I use this a lot because I think voice messages mean that people can hear you. They can hear your tone of voice. They can hear the emotion in your voice. It's harder for them to, well, it's easier for them to interpret what you really mean behind your words. So,
Yes.
even if we don't have live, real time, synchronous communication, we can
Mhm.
still create some level of connection through using voice messages where I use this a lot in my personal life, but even in my work life as well, because again, it
Mhm.
creates a sense of connection. People think of you when they hear your voice, even if there's no visual on that.
Yes. Oh, I love, love, love that you said this, and we can wrap up with this one, because that is one of my favorite things to tell people. You can still have asynchronous communication. So if you're running and you're not able to connect by phone, yes, it does seem harder these days for a lot of people to make time to make a phone call. We're doing 10,000 things. Okay. So, but a voice message, you're right. The nuance, the subtleties, the hesitations, the pauses,
Mm.
the tonal inflections, in linguistics, we call it prosodics and suprasegmental elements of voice, but it's the vocal varieties, right? Where
Mhm.
there's like 8 different vocal varieties. There's so much. And that flavor of you that comes through in that message really does give a different feel than when you're typing something out. On top of that, it's because when the person receives something you've written, they might be in a different headspace.
Mhm.
And so they might receive the thing you've written to them in a way it was not intended on your side. And so they're like, well, why is this person, this used to happen with somebody I used to work with long ago, where we would email, and she was constantly taking my emails the wrong way. And then we get on a phone
Mhm.
call because I was like, I don't think you understood what I meant there. So I'm going to say it differently, and I'm going to say it to you. And then let's have a conversation about this. And I realized that she was just interpreting it through the lens of, she was in a very high stress situation work wise. She was very constantly overwhelmed, constantly frustrated. And all of her frustration, her overwhelm, and her dissatisfaction with her work was bleeding through onto my written communications with her.
Mm.
And I see that happen for so many people. Somebody will text message someone something, and they're like, and the other person attacks them, and like, whoa, where did that come from? I don't understand why they interpreted it that way. So I love what you're saying there. I think that's a really important tangible takeaway that we should give people.
Mhm.
Um, So, and we have one final comment here. I love that AI is making us consider um, epistemic issues. How do we know what we know? What is right
Mm,
versus resonates? It's
mm,
ultimately a very human question. It's so true.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
it challenges our ethics, our question, it challenges around, do we really know why things are the right way? Really challenges us into also, back to our very first theme, do we really know what makes us human? What is the right way to prioritize being a person? What does it mean to communicate, connect, and collaborate with people wherever they are around the world? And I think for me, that is ultimately what we're here to do. I think that is a key part of who we are.
Oh, I love that. I want to leave it at that because I think that helps us gain, as one of your 4 pillars, a little bit more clarity.
Mm,
That maybe having clarity on where we're going with all of this is the most important piece, right?
mhm,
We've let the horse out of the barn. Now we're trying to figure out how to corral it. And I think that is everybody's responsibility. Anybody who's utilizing, whether it's AI or who's in a culturally, just a diverse landscape, which again, as you well pointed out, can be in one office, in one location, in one small place,
mm,
needs to take all of these pieces into consideration in the world we're currently experiencing on a
mm,
global level. And we all, I believe, have an accountability and a responsibility to where we're heading. And we can all do our part in sometimes the most seemingly insignificant ways, by sending a voice message to someone instead of sending a text message.
mhm. Yeah.
Small measures change the way we show up in the world. Thank you. This has been delightful. I really, really appreciate your input, your time, your energy, and honestly, what you do in the world matters.
Oh,
It matters so greatly. I mean, I think leaders more than anything else need to be the ones who lead us, who work towards leading in the right direction. Right.
well, thank you, Yorona. It was just a real pleasure to join you today, and really fascinating conversation. Lots of twists
Oh,
and
thank you.
turns.
So many twists and turns. I love it. I love it. And on that note, everybody, this is Conversations That Matter. Remember to please reach out to Victoria. Victoria, do you want to give your website to everybody in case they want to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the easiest place for people to find me is here on LinkedIn. My personal profile is Victoria Rennoldson, which is RENNOLDSON. Find out about the book. Love for you to discover the book, Become a Global Leader. Again, just come on to my LinkedIn profile. You'll find lots about the book there, or message me. Always love following people, connecting. So feel free to reach out if these topics have been of interest to you today. Love to kind of get to meet you. But thank you, Rona. Really appreciate
Thank
this
you.
conversation today.
Oh, me too. This is going to be a great one for unpacking later in my brain. And on that note, everybody, have a lovely weekend ahead. And this was Conversations That Matter. Thank you.